Hi, Dr. TJ Dixon, your intuitive guide to transformation, connecting to your best life. Today's message is about stepping out of our comfort zones to follow the voice of God. So this message came about because lately I have been reading about, hearing about stories of various people, including myself, who have had to get uncomfortable because we heard and been inspired by the voice of God, leading us into, sometimes it's been letting go of a position, moving across country, taking up a new course and line of work, following our dreams. And all of that has led us to get out of our comfort zone and really sometimes do some pretty drastic things, stepping out in faith because we heard the voice of God. So, for example, one of my friends, she has moved from the place she was born and raised, that she grew up in, and she has moved across the country, her husband and her daughters, and they stepped out on faith because both she and her husband heard the voice of God leading them to move on to this new state in this new place, to start their lives over there. And for them, it was a scary situation, and it was because logically it didn't make sense. And sometimes when God talks to us and asks us to do something, when God is really leading our lives, it doesn't always make sense here, but it makes sense to our spirit. So sometimes we got to get out of our heads and go into and allow our spirits and our intuition to lead us. And for them, they've moved. When they left town, her husband had not gotten another job that would replace the one that he was going to have there in the new town for 6 months. But now he has another job. They have a beautiful home. They live in a beautiful place. And they followed and they were obedient to the voice of God, and things are working out. Another example, I recently saw a video, and it was Tyler Perry talking about how he heard the voice of God when he was initially starting to do his plays, and he would sell everything he had and put all of his money into these plays, and nobody would show up, and he'd lose money, and at one point even ended up homeless. And so he was getting frustrated, saying, God, I know that that I heard your voice, that you told me to do this, and now here I am, no one's here, I'm losing money. Well, part of that, as Tyler put it, part of that was he needed to forgive his father. Now, his plays oftentimes had that kind of slant where there was an adult, they had gone through trauma as a child, they had gone through abuse, and they were forgiving the person who had abused them. But he himself had never done that. And once he forgave his father, well, the rest is history. His plays had continued to sell out. He's now doing movies, TVs, and has one of the largest studios in the country located in Atlanta. But for him, he said he had to be taken on that journey. He had to be taken on that journey to even see that he needed to forgive his father. He had to be taken on that journey so that he would do well and really have faith to continue to follow the voice of God when God would tell him what to do. And now, again, for him, things turned out very, very well. And then I can even look at myself. When I went back to school, I went back to school to get my doctorate in metaphysical science, and I was working a career in accounting and business. Logically, people would think, oh, you'd go to school to get your doctorate. If you're going to get a doctorate, you'd get it in business administration and accounting or something. But I never felt led that was what I was supposed to do. Logically, it made sense, but it never worked out for me to do it that way. But when I heard the voice of God and I felt led, here it was to get a doctorate in metaphysical science. And to be quite honest, I didn't even know what that was initially. I had to really do some research to figure out what does this metaphysical science thing means. And I went on and I got the doctorate. But even when I went back to school, though, logically it made no sense. I was working full time in a very, very demanding job. I was a newlywed. And so I had 3 kids. No, I think we had 4 kids in college at the time. So logically, none of it made any sense. It was like, where am I going to get the time? Where am I going to get the money to do this? But I followed the voice of God and the money was provided. I even got a scholarship, which was shocking to me. I was like, I'm not going to get a scholarship, but I kept hearing the voice of God, apply. And I got this scholarship and I was able to pay for it actually out of pocket and still meet all the obligations I had with being, with having our children in college and working the demanding job and even being a newlywed. And not only was I told to get the doctorate, but I also heard the voice of God say, and you need to do it. You need to do it within this time period. And that time period was about a year. And I'm like, that makes no sense. How the heck am I going to do this in a year? And God provided. And God let me know, I'll provide for you. Just follow what I'm telling you. So there were many, many early mornings before work up, studying, writing papers, doing research, many late nights. And I think every Saturday for probably a year, I spent that time really immersed in my studies. And guess what? I got done within the time frame. Well, that ended up working out because little did I know when I first got inspired about getting the doctorate that I was in my last year of working full time as an accountant. I, at the time, did not know that, but I followed that inspiration and months later also heard the voice of God to say that my work was finished with the organization as their VP of Operations and CFO, and I was to resign and retire from accounting and go into my new career of healing and wellness, focusing in on holistic healing, mind, body, spirit, relationships, and finances. And that was within that same year period. And so by the time I was done with that job, which happened in February, I think the middle of February, 2 weeks before that, I got the message from the school that I had indeed, my dissertation had been accepted, and I indeed was going to graduate that May with my doctorate in metaphysical science. Again, following the voice of God, not seeing the full picture, but just following the voice of God. In all of these cases, all of us were uncomfortable. My friend who moved across country certainly was uncomfortable moving to a place that she did not have a bunch of family. All her family, or majority of her family, was in her hometown. With little ones, moving across the country, not knowing what was going to happen. Her husband not even having yet the permanent job that he would have there, but still following the voice of God. When you look at Tyler Perry, certainly being homeless would be uncomfortable if you're not wanting to be homeless. It's not comfortable when you put on a play and no one shows up, or the people who show up are 30 people that you actually know who came just to show support. For me, it was uncomfortable getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning studying before I had to be at work at 9. Taking, my Saturdays to study. It wasn't comfortable. Wasn't comfortable doing it at that time in that type of way. It wasn't even comfortable when I received the message from God that I was to resign as the VP of Operations and Chief Financial Officer, because at that time I was told I'm going to build this business, and I did not have income that I was earning to replace the income from that position. Did not have it at all, but I had to step out in faith and follow the leading and guiding I was getting and following the voice of God. So I tell you, give you these examples and tell you this because there might be something you may be hearing. What is it that you're hearing from the voice of God? What is it that is nagging you and that is on you and logically it just makes no sense to you. What are you supposed to be following right now? And likely it's going to take you out your comfort zone. I'll give you one more example, and this one's happening to me right now. I have been hearing the voice of God to take this particular workshop, and it's about a newer concept that it's actually very old, and it's found, I think, with indigenous populations, but it's a newer concept here in the U.S., and it's called midwifing death, or being a death doula. And so what that means is basically you know, the person who comes in, they are assisting a person who's going through the transition of from physical life to death, going through a physical death. They're assisting that person as well as their family to go through that transition at the highest level and that they can. And it helps to soothe and ease that transition. And there's a number of ways to do it. But it's kind of sort of like hospice, but not exactly, because it's not so much worrying about what's happening to the physical body, which is what hospice people will do to try to make sure that the person's comfortable by giving them morphine and all that kind of stuff. It's not that. It's more about what their spirit and their minds are going through. And I have not yet taken the workshop. The workshop's coming up next month. In fact, when I finish this video, I'm going to be booking my ticket and paying my registration to go to the workshop. But I has been hearing the voice of God about taking this workshop. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I am a person that feels a lot, and I do connect with people, and a lot of times I feel their energy. So it's really logically makes no sense, because that would be kind of challenging for me. But following the voice of God and having all the signs around me that this is just going to be this will be another tool in my handbag as a coach, as a wellness provider, as a healer, that this is information that I'm going to need, because I inevitably end up in positions where, like, even if I'm going in and say I'm doing books for someone, sometimes I'm been put in a position where maybe my client is actually sick and is dying, and having to deal with what's happening to them and deal with their families who are going to be here still to transition even their finances over to help the family in that process. So here I am once again, uncomfortable, but I'm following the voice of God, and I know that this is going to work out, and it's going to be the right thing to do, just like I knew when I went to school to get the doctorate, just like I saw what has happened with Tyler Perry, just like I see what has happened with my friend. When you follow the voice of God, will you get uncomfortable? Likely, absolutely, you probably will. But will that lead you to your best life? Absolutely, it does. So I encourage you today. What is it that God has put on your heart? What is it that you know that you're hearing the voice of God, that you're supposed to be following, but you're kind of scared and you haven't done it yet because it takes you out your comfort zone? I encourage you today, follow the voice of God. Get uncomfortable and live your best life. Thank you for watching, and take care.